All right, let's dive into a scientific detective story that happens on a scale that is almost impossible to wrap your head around. We're talking about a really strange mystery, one that involves grape-like clumps and a tale of two impossibly thin films.
So let's start with a question that's actually pretty relatable. How do you make metal last forever? Stop it from rusting, stop it from wearing out. It's a massive challenge for pretty much everything, from our phones to giant bridges. And, well, scientists are on the case.
And that very quest has led them into the wild world of advanced coatings. They're on the hunt for new materials that can basically form an invisible, invincible shield over metals.
Now, the solution they're working on is kind of mind-bending. We're not talking about slapping on a thick coat of paint here. We're talking about a protective film, a nanofilm, that is literally thousands of times thinner than a single strand of your hair.
The hero of our story, the material that has researchers so fired up, is called iron carbide, or for the chemists out there, Fe7C3. The thinking is that this specific compound could be a total game changer, giving metals incredible resistance to both corrosion, rust, and just plain old physical wear and tear.
So how in the world do you create a film that thin? I mean, you can't just paint it on. The method is this incredible form of high-tech atomic engineering. You could almost call it cooking with plasma.
The official name for it is Plasma-Enhanced Chemical Vapor Deposition, or just PCVD for short. Yeah, it sounds super complicated, but the idea behind it is actually brilliant. You're essentially building a brand new material, one single layer of atoms at a time, by using this super energized gas called a plasma, all inside a vacuum chamber.
Let's walk through it real quick. First, scientists feed a couple of gases, iron pentacarbonyl and hydrogen, into a chamber. Then they zap it with an electrical field. This creates what's called a glow discharge, which turns that gas into a plasma. And finally, atoms from that plasma sort of rain down and settle onto a surface that's been heated up to 300 degrees Celsius, slowly but surely building that ultra-thin film.
And when the researchers first did this, you know what? Everything pointed to a complete and total success, a home run.
I mean, the initial results just couldn't have been clearer. The research paper says that the X-ray data from their first films showed only Fe7C3. That's it. That's exactly what they were hoping for. A pure, perfect film of this amazing new material. So, it was a textbook success, right? Mission accomplished? Well, not so fast, because in science, just knowing it worked isn't enough. To really understand what they'd made, they needed to zoom in, like way in, with a powerful electron microscope. And that's when things started to get weird. This is where our story takes a really sharp turn. This is where it becomes a tale of two very, very different films.
See, to get the film ready for the microscope, they had to make some brand new samples. But when they did, they found that the film they were creating wasn't always the same. Something was changing from batch to batch. The big question was, what?
And here is the heart of the mystery. Now, for some context, an Angstrom is an insanely tiny unit of measurement. A single human hair is about 500,000 of them wide. So the films that were super thin, under 200 angstroms, they were perfect, totally uniform. But the slightly thicker films, around 800 angstroms, they were a total mess. We're talking two completely different structures made from the exact same process. How is that even possible?
This whole puzzle, this weird inconsistency, led them down a rabbit hole. An investigation you could call the grape-like clump mystery.
Because when they finally got that thicker, problematic film under the microscope, they found it wasn't just one structure. It was like they had stumbled upon two totally different worlds, just existing right next to each other.
Okay, so the first structure was kind of what you'd expect to see. These half-micron-sized grains, and remember, a micron is still about 1/100th the width of a hair, separated by a little space, sometimes linked up by these crystal platelets. It was organized, it was crystalline, pretty normal stuff.
But then there was this other thing, these bizarre 300 angstrom-wide clumps that looked, for all the world, like tiny little bunches of grapes. They were made of even smaller crystals and were just a completely alien formation. They just didn't belong there.
So what were they? Where did they come from?
The researchers were looking for clues, and they found the most important one hiding in plain sight, right there, wrapped around the clumps themselves.
50 Angstroms. Each one of those weird grape-like clumps was surrounded by this incredibly thin 50 angstrom coating. To put that in perspective, that's about the width of 20 atoms lined up side by side. And this coating wasn't crystalline like everything else around it. It was amorphous, meaning it had no structure. This was the smoking gun.
And that's when it clicked. They realized this wasn't happening during the creation process, but after it was all done. They figured out that the film must have reacted with tiny, trace amounts of oxygen in the chamber after it was made. This post-formation oxidation would have kicked carbon atoms out of the iron carbide, creating that weird, structureless coating and forcing the leftover material to rearrange itself into those strange grape-like clumps. The mystery, it was solved.
So, mystery solved, right? But what does this all mean? What does this accidental discovery tell us about the future of these films?
Well, it means that this mistake, this unexpected contamination, it wasn't a failure in the slightest. It was actually a critical discovery. It revealed this hidden process, a whole new way that these nanomaterials can behave and change all on their own. And that right there is the key takeaway. If you want to design the super strong, rust-proof materials of the future, you have to understand not just how to build them, but all the weird and unexpected ways they can change. Controlling these tiny, unexpected structures, that's everything.
Which really just leaves us with one final big thought. We just saw how one tiny, unexpected reaction at the atomic level created a completely new structure. It just makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other incredible materials are just waiting out there to be discovered once we truly learn how to control matter, atom by single atom?